It's that time again for another 4K comparison between Stadia and GeForce Now with Ragnarok, the DLC for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So let's get into it. What's up, Cloud Gamers? Welcome back to the Cloud Gaming Extreme channel, and today we're going to be taking a look at Assassin's Creed Ragnarok compared in 4K to Stadia and GeForce Now. But don't forget, if you're new here, to give us a subscribe, give the video a like as it really helps us out here on YouTube, and hit that bell if you'd like to know when new content drops. So we're going to take a look at latency, or rather talk about input latency for Ragnarok here on the two platforms, and we're also going to get into image quality. We'll talk about that a little bit, and I'll give you a lot of different scenes to take a look at. But the first thing I want to talk about is the input latency and how the game just feels to play when it comes to GeForce Now and Stadia. And we will be looking at Stadia on both its high frame rate and quality modes, while GeForce Now will be running on very high settings at a locked 60 FPS. It may dip to 51 to 60 here and there depending on what part of the game, but it largely is able to hold that at a native 4K in game. So let's go ahead and start off by getting into the latency discussion for Ragnarok. So playing in 4K and capturing this, I was using the Series X controller for GFN, as I always do, and the Stadia controller for Stadia. That's through Wi-Fi and typically would give me the best latency. Now, when it comes to the results here, I'm not able to use my LDAT tool, of course, like I could for mouse clicks on a PC, but I'm able to use my experience and talk about the latency a little bit. And it's not very surprising what the results wind up being here when it comes to GFN versus Stadia. And so for the most part, during combat, moving around, dodging, all the things you need to do, GFN offers the tighter latency even with the Bluetooth Series X controller. Going into Stadia with their quality mode, which is their 4K native resolution mode, I believe, and hits you more around 30 FPS, there's obviously an increased latency for multiple reasons there, but one of the big ones being frame rate. It's about half that of what's running on GFN or Stadia's high frame rate mode, which in turn will increase latency regardless. It was a bit more spongy and took me some adapting, but by no means became unplayable or was a major issue, but bouncing around between all three, I did notice that increased latency on quality mode and did have to adapt to it a little bit. Now, when it comes to Stadia's high frame rate mode on Ragnarok, this is by far the mode I would prefer to play if I was playing this on Stadia. I didn't have to adapt very much. The input latency felt about as close to GeForce Now's 3080 as you're going to get, and it didn't have quite as much of a spongy feel as quality did for me, because we do have that increased frame rate here, which really helps. It also makes the gameplay much smoother and feel better in combat as well, so it would definitely be my preferred way to play. But when it comes to input latency, honestly, for both of these platforms and both modes on Stadia, they both played really well. It's just that on quality mode, I do notice the most input latency, and then we have Stadia's high frame rate, and the best being GFN's 3080. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some image quality, both in full screen and side by sides for you guys here. Now, things do get a bit tricky because with GFN we are running the PC version, and with Stadia it tends to be more like what feels like console ports, so it's not apples to apples, but it's still interesting to take a look at. And when you go from GeForce Now to Stadia here, you can see the difference in image quality, a little bit more compression, pixelation going on in the darker areas, but still pretty clear. Things get a little less clear on the high frame rate mode and a little bit more pixelated in the darker area here, and I'm going to show you these side by side as well, but holding its own when it comes up against GeForce Now's 3080. But side by side, you can definitely see the difference if I really focus in on this dark area of the cave when it comes to the compression and the way that the streams handle the darker areas of the stream. Definitely GFN takes it here. Stadia is doing a fine job on quality, and you do notice it more over on the high frame rate mode. Now, as we move outside here, side by side, is when you'll really start to see the difference in the lighting and shadow schemes and colors here when it comes to GeForce Now and Stadia. I personally much prefer the colors and the graphics over on GFN myself, and it feels much more natural. Less bright, less blue, less bright on the greens, that type of thing. Also, if you really look out into the distance at the rocks, the grass, everything else, you'll see it's just a bit cleaner and looks more natural and realistic over on GFN, even though Stadia does a decent job with having good amount of ground clutter and that type of thing. It just doesn't quite hold the detail that GFN does here. And when we're moving like this and panning on the screen, you can definitely see that the Stadia 60 FPS mode and the GFN 60 FPS mode are pretty close. GFN's a bit smoother, but Stadia does a decent job. And then in the middle, we have the 30 FPS, which I think you should be able to see pretty well there. Now guys, before we wrap up this video and I throw in some final thoughts, I've got some scenes that I think are well worth the look when it comes to the comparison, so let's drop those right here and then I'll get back with you at the end. Alright guys, that's going to bring us to the end of our comparison for Ragnarok on the Stadia and GeForce Now at 4K, and I gotta say that this game has cleaned up a bit on Stadia from the time that it launched, especially with the high frame rate mode. I think they've done a lot to improve it. GeForce Now's 3080 tier, especially in 4K, does still reign supreme when it comes to picture quality and latency, and having the option to run those PC settings so you can jack those down or up or whatever you want to do and run a full native 4K in game as well. But Stadia did a great job here, and Ragnarok and Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a gorgeous game that looks great on both platforms. And with that being said, guys, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. If you haven't already, subscribe, thumbs up, ring the bell, you know what to do, and leave us your comments down below. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next one.